Hi, everyone. Today is November 11th of 2020.
But Sam, as we kick off this November 11th, are there any upcoming dates that you see that we should be especially watching out for? Do you have anything kind of on the radar that you're thinking either political or crypto-wise?
Well, December the 10th. So we like to play that little game with dates. And I do think that December 10th, it is going to be cryptos.
And inevitably, the topic that I come up with, somebody will have a question on that topic. So tonight's shout out goes to Steve M. And Steve, I'm going to read your question to kick us off for our topic tonight. So Steve M says, "Hi guys, I don't know if you've covered this yet, but have you looked into David Pilates' missing 411 project? He is a retired detective who investigates people who go missing, mainly from national forests under unusual circumstances. Fascinating stuff." Well, wouldn't you know it, I have not clued in anyone that I watched this or was going to have this as the topic tonight, but I've been feeling it for about a week. So, Steve M., you get the award tonight for predicting the topic. That's exactly what we're going to talk about.
And was it the same man?
Yeah, that's the exact.
Oh, wow.
And so,
wow, because he's not the only one who does that kind of stuff, the missing persons.
Right. He's been around for a while. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Dave Pilates, he's a former law enforcement officer, and he's kind of done the circuit of like Coast to Coast AM, and he's been researching this for a year. And he has several books out. I have a couple of them. They're called this Missing 411. And he covers people that have gone. He really started off in national parks. And one of the things about national parks is they don't really keep a list of missing people, which is kind of scary. There's kind of a gap there in the law enforcement tracking of that. But he's written a number of books, and he covers the U.S. and Canada, a lot of the national parks. But in addition to this, he also writes about Bigfoot. He's a MUFON investigator, the Mutual UFO Network. And, one of the things I respect about this is when he talks about missing people, he's very careful not to conflate any of these topics, because just out of respect for the people that have gone missing, you don't want to go on and say, well, Bigfoot probably stole your son or something like that. So he, that's one thing he's very good about, very disciplined about. But he goes over these cases, and the criteria that he looks at is you rule out things that are, suicide, drowning, possibility of just getting lost and dying, animal predation. So those are all things that he rules out, and he goes with things that are just truly these odd disappearances with strange circumstances. They also end up in clusters, and I'll show the back of the book here. These are different clusters of where people have gone missing in various national parks. That's the other thing that he pulls out. In some cases, the clusters happen across decades, maybe a 10 or 20 year span where these disappearances, but they all happen in the same area. In some cases, places have already been searched and they find someone. Some cases, a lot of them, like their people's shoes are missing, their clothes have been almost like melted off their body. So German heritage is a common element of these. So Sam, as I just kind of talk about the types of things that Dave looks at, do you think he's onto something with these types of patterns? Or do you think we're ended up, the human mind is just connecting dots where maybe they shouldn't be connected?
I think he's on to something.
Okay, good. All right. And, personally, I think I see him as a, trustworthy person. I don't get any vibes about him being dishonest or exaggerate, and whether or not he exaggerate, he tells very good stories. He's a very good speaker. But I don't know, any thoughts about, does he seem, as I talk about him and his name, does it seem like a trustworthy person that gives these accounts?
Oh, yeah. And, and that's the first thing that I always read into. I did look him up, and I did actually watch. I was doing some other stuff, so it's easy for me just to put it on, like, TV in the background, but I'm there looking at it, listening to it. I like how he even has the picture of one of the women, and he holds it up and he goes, and this is her, and shows the picture, and I'm looking at it intensely, right, to see, what I can pick up. Okay, what happened to that person, that sort of thing. So I would say for sure that he is not a fraud, nor do I feel like he is embellishing, adding to, or making up, or trying to turn things into salacious headlines. His motivation is pure. And just like, people, we all want to make a difference in the world. And many people are questioning, what can I do to leave a mark, to make a difference, to use my talent, whatever it is that I have, And even if it's like, knitting socks for homeless people, like I don't care what it is, like something that you do that helps your fellow man. And this is this guy's calling. And so he gets a lot of, that's what I was seeing, like the pictures, he gets a lot of personal satisfaction. And when you hear him talking about how some of these women were like only children and their parents have passed away now. And so nobody is looking for them. Nobody is wondering about them. Just for him, and he's feeling that he needs to do that for them as well. So that just, again, shows you another layer to his personality and his motivation, which is all on the positive, all the good side, all of the wonderful things about some humans. I know that we focus a lot of times on bad and evil and a lot of times like bad decisions people make as well. They're not necessarily evil. They're just the decision they made was, quite evil. But and usually made because they're deluded, misunderstanding, or like I was talking before about, the election night, I was talking about the ballot box stuffing. And I said, these people, they really do feel like they're saving you from a tyrant. Like they're not, this is not, I'm going to win. I don't care at all costs. I don't care about you people. It's, we have to, this guy is, we're all going down the well and they just can't see. And, like that's, so you get the impressions from people and society as a medium when you're looking at the ethos, and you can sort of zoom in on an individual, like with this fella here, David, what did you say his last name is?
Pilates.
Okay. Yeah. So when you zoom in on David Pilates, you can see all of these different layers of his personality, what drives him. And it's all coming up positive, green, positive, light. So again, and he's a great storyteller as well. So he's using his talent to draw people into these stories so that he can make a difference. And I do think that a lot of these missing people, I mean, you can go through them one by one, but there are some cases of people stumbling upon a Bigfoot creature, which would have passed through the portal so they can come from the other side over. That's where they come from. That was my information. I mean, I wasn't even sure if they were real or not, but then you asked, and then I asked the people on the other side, what's the deal on this? And then they showed me, I was like, oh, wow, that's pretty weird. I wouldn't have even thought about that. Yeah. And I do think as well that there is an extensive number of portals in places like the ocean. Right. Yeah. So that's why you see a lot of UFOs, that they just go right into the ocean. And that's because the portals have to be in a place that it's not in anybody's way, because they don't want you to stumble upon it by accident. Right. And sometimes these people do. And this is the feeling of illness that they're getting. Right. Is that this portal is opening and stuff.
Oh, right? Yeah. Because sometimes people think it's infrasound that they're being targeted, but it could also be they're feeling that portal. So that's interesting.
Yeah. And here's the interesting thing. There's two types of portals, and I'm just learning this tonight, so you guys can learn it with me, because the people just told me. Because while I'm having this conversation with you, I'm asking them about the portal in my house that I don't live in, because things keep coming out and bothering my son. I can turn it off and stuff. I can go anywhere. I'm not afraid of any place. I can go into an abandoned mine. I can go into the most haunted house in the world, and I'm fine. Like, I can protect myself. I can turn it off. But my son has different abilities, and he's very young. He's still in elementary school. Like, he can't control it. And for those people who've been having problems with the vibrational lift this last week, oh my goodness, my poor son. I mean, he's having problems with that as well. So anybody who has like abilities, even if you had very little before, you have more now than what you had before, because again, everybody's leveling up. Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. But one of the things about the portals was that I have a portal in my house. Right.
Your own one or your old one?
My old one.
Oh, okay.
All right. I moved out. Right. It's a really old one. Right. And it was here during a natural disaster as well, like a big natural disaster. And the house survived because we have a great big hill that the windows didn't even break. When I moved in, the original windows were still there too.
Okay.
With the wavy glass. I've since replaced them because I mean they're terrible for heat, right? So I've since replaced them with new ones because they needed to be replaced. But at that time the house was 100 years old at that time. I felt it was time. But there is a portal there, and that is where a number of other things come out of there, but they come from the in-between and from they come from, that's the best way I can describe it. They come from the in-between, the place where things are trapped, and they can come through that portal. And I think that's where Dark Man comes from and stuff. But the portal that the UFOs come through, that's different. That's not the same as the portal I have in my house, and that you might have, some people might have in homes or schools, various places, buildings, abandoned mines. There's different, and it's usually one that's been opened up by spiritual activity, or like in the case of what I believe happened here, like this big natural disaster where boom, you had all of these people immediately killed.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, many people slowly dying from the disaster, trapped in their home because their homes burned. Right. Because it was a long time ago. Right. So anyways, so that created a situation, but then there's the other situation created by the portals that the UFOs come through. And I think that's what some of these people who are in the national parks get tangled up in. But I also want to recognize Kat M's suggestion and up in the chat room there that the criminals in America, they know how poorly patrolled the national parks are. Yeah. And if you were somebody who was on the down low, and maybe you either committed crimes or, wanted to, or just, you were getting off the grid, mental problems, what have you, you'd go into a national park, you'd pitch a tent, nobody would find you.
Well, yeah. And, and as you go through these, you never want to speculate. And again, I like how Dave does it. He just doesn't conflate the issues, but the conclusion seemed to be that, and that's those three things is, some sort of creature gets them, a cryptid creature, a portal, or some sort of alien abduction. And we covered all these, in previous episodes. I think one of the early ones we talked about skyquakes, where a guy told about an experience where he walked through and, almost felt like, wait a minute, where am I? And then later on he came back. So, but what I want to do, Sam, is go through and talk about two examples and just get your thoughts, because one of these is a high profile one that happened back in the late 1960s. So let's go through and see what you get for what might have happened to this young man, Dennis Martin. All right. So this is a story that Dave has reported numerous times in different interviews, but it's a compelling one. In June 14th, 1969, a 6-year-old boy by the name of Dennis Martin went missing in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And this is in the area right around like Tennessee, North Carolina, that area. Dennis was with his dad, grandpa, and 9-year-old brother hiking the Appalachian Trail. They stopped at a place called Spence Field. Another family walked up and asked if their kids could play together, and the kids started playing hide and seek. So Mr. Martin watched Dennis run and hide behind a bush, and he saw him and he kept an eye on him. And when the game was up, Dennis never came out. His dad, they called for him. He went over there and looked, and he couldn't find him. So his dad takes off on a run down the Appalachian Trail about 2 miles to see if he could find him. He couldn't have gotten that far. He's a 6-year-old boy, right? No sign of him. So he came back and Mr. Martin told his father, Dennis's grandfather, go get the Rangers. Let's start looking for help. So by the time they got the search party together and the Rangers up there, it was probably closer to 5 in the evening. And it started to rain. Some bad weather had come through. This is another common occurrence with a lot of these disappearances. So around this time, or shortly thereafter, in an area that's about 2,000 foot below the Appalachian Trail where they were at, another family went to an area to view wildlife in a place called Rowan's Creek. They were the Key family, Key. So they went and did some wildlife viewing. And when they were out, they heard one of the loudest screams they've ever heard. And the son says, hey, Dad, look, there's a bear running behind the bushes there. And the dad says, that looks like a man, like, playing hide and seek behind the trees. There was also a report that maybe they saw him like a hairy figure running through the woods with something slung over its shoulders. But in any event, a large-scale search party with about 1,400 people were organized, failed to turn up anything substantial. Mr. Martin stayed in the park like 6 months, every day looking for his son. 60 Green Berets also came in to help with the search, but they stayed completely separate from the authorities and didn't work with them at all. And there was an FBI agent monitoring the case. So, Sam, as I tell this story, what do you think happened with this young Dennis Martin when he was playing hide and seek?
That was my option, was that the creature took him.
Okay. And that's one where I think that's the conclusion a lot of people come to when they hear this story and because they do hide, there's reports of them hiding, and there's reports of them taking children, and, sometimes the kids come back and they'll tell stories about being with the hairy man. So this, it's scary to think about. What do you think this is odd that the U.S. military comes in with the Green Berets in search party. They keep separate. Do you think this is something that the government maybe is aware of in this area and they just kind of kept it to themselves?
Yes, because they didn't want to frighten people. I mean, look at his father stayed out there for 6 months and didn't see or hear anything. I mean, it's an anomaly. It's not something that happens very often. And and you don't want to scare people saying like these random, wild, beasts are, human-like, or, just appear and we can't seem to catch them. We never find any bones.
Yeah.
But there's sightings, and the scream is that pretty much gives, because that would be my only question I would ask somebody, did you hear a very loud scream?
Okay.
Because that is a lot of times just an immediate indication that they are there. And usually when they appear, when they end up crossing through into our side of things, this is quite upsetting for them as well.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. A lot of people will say it sounds like a woman screaming or being murdered, and then it goes into a growl sometimes. So it's very odd. And people are saying it's so loud you can't believe, and it sounds like it's right over there, right nearby, but you don't see any sign of it. So the fascinating thing about all these topics is they don't become more clear. They become more converged when you start getting into the weird woo stuff. So that's what I love about it. So thanks for that, Sam. One more case. This is a quick one. And this one it has a lot of common elements that we see in a lot of David's cases. This is William Oberkaiser, and he went missing in Newfoundland. So William was a retired electrical linesman from the state of Indiana, and he was an experienced hunter and outdoorsman. On October 5th, 2011, he left home from Indiana en route to Newfoundland, Canada, arriving to his destination on October 9th. Now, for those of you who don't know, Newfoundland is about as far east as you can go on the North American continent. You have to drive up through Canada, and it's kind of northeast of Maine and Nova Scotia, that area, so way up to the northeast of the North American continent. So he had been to this camp several times before, but another hunter saw his truck abandoned on a remote road. And after seeing it for a couple of days, he reported it to the RCMP. And it was down a very rough road that you wouldn't even want to drive probably a four-wheeler down almost, and it was stuck on a log. So in his vehicle, the RCMP found his money, his hearing aids, 2 firearms. And these are all things like if you were going to hike out on foot, if you got stuck and you were going to go back to the main road, you'd probably carry some of these things with you would think, especially, some money, things like that. So a helicopter was dispatched from the 103rd Rescue Squadron from the Air Force Base in Gander, Newfoundland, or did they say Newfoundland and Labrador? It's the area up there. And some K9 units. None of the dogs were able to pick up a trail or find him. So, Sam, this shares a number of common elements with these stories where you have an experienced hunter in an area they are familiar with. They're intelligent, they're capable. Seemingly all their items are left behind, and it's like they dropped off the face of the earth. Dogs either won't pick up a scent or they're unwilling to pick up a scent. Bad weather moves in to hinder the search, that type of thing. So, Sam, with this William Oberkaiser, what do you think happened with him and his vehicle being abandoned?
I think I would have to talk to somebody who was from the area to sort of do the deduction to explain what I'm seeing. But I literally saw him standing on what he thought was solid ground and then breaking through.
Wow.
And so I was thinking that there was a river that I don't know if it ran underneath, and if there was like snow and he didn't see it, or it may be on the snow and he didn't know there was water underneath it, and he just broke through. And the reason he had all this stuff in the truck was he was trying to figure out where he was, so he was just looking for a higher.
Okay.
He was just hiking out. He didn't think he was going to be like, there's his vehicle, right? Yeah. So he wasn't very far from it, so that if there had been a wild animal or anything like that, he would have seen it, heard it, and been able to get to his vehicle fast enough. I think he carried something with him anyways, like an axe or some sort of, see, I would ask his wife, I would say, did he carry an axe? Because he's showing that he's using this axe to sort of pull himself up to take a look, and he wanted to see where he was, because you said the truck was stuck. That was what was happening.
Stuck on a log.
Yeah, he got stuck on a log, so he was trying to figure out which, he was. I don't know what he was looking for, but he needed higher ground, and it was through that he ended up falling through. And it's like I just feel like they're never going to find his body.
Okay. Wow, fascinating. Thanks, Sam. And those are things that can happen when you're out by yourself in the wilderness. That's why when I used to do gold prospecting, even though I feel young and able, I always went with the buddy because sometimes you get out to these places, and if something happens, you're like, oop, you're on your own.
Yeah, even if you don't have, I won't go out without a big fire. I remember since I had like this huge brown bear walk out in front of me. I mean, his rump was like up to my nose. And until you like have a bear walk out in front of you that's that big, right? I mean, you don't even know how powerful they are. You're just like, okay, what am I going to do if this thing goes after that baby that's a few feet away from me, right?
Right.
You're not thinking of running. You're like, this is going to be a tough one, right? Thankfully, though, the dogs, once they saw it, it's credit to being a psychic person, because I saw that bear before anyone else did.
Maybe this is something we'll come back to occasionally. If there's an interesting David Paulides stories people want to look at, let me know. Maybe it's something we'll look forward to.
Yeah, missing people, I'd love to help. I'm looking forward to. I know people will find me in the future to help them find missing people.
Well, and that's what David said. If any psychics want to jump in, if you're good, you can tell me what happened. I'll make you famous. So I know you're not looking for fame right now, but it would be interesting if one of these cases comes up. Maybe we'll highlight that. Winter writes, blue, a light blue pickup. Yeah, they didn't mention the color of his truck, Winter. But as we come here into the Q&A session, this is something Moo had mentioned on a previous, I don't know if it was the Psychic Nerds, but this is fun one. If you have some abilities and you want to start testing your skills, as I read these questions out to Sam, I encourage people to either, maybe type it to someone, type it here in the live chat, but see what you get on the questions. And if you want to test your abilities, Moo and I were doing that on one of the Ask a Mediums. It was kind of fun to see what we were getting, and you just go with whatever your first impression is, right? So for everyone out there, get some practice in.
Yeah, no, and it's fantastic practice. That's really great advice, Rudy, because I would have to say that the Ask a Medium is probably the most challenging one for me to do. And anybody who was looking at training to be a medium, who's like, you know what, I think I'm pretty good, I think I can do readings and stuff like that, I'd be like, hey, get a crew together and do like the same format. And then if you can read people and have hits, just doing that, oh yeah, you know what you're doing. Like once I could do that, I was like, okay, but it takes practice, so that you start to understand the difference between, a thought that's coming into your mind and something that the people on the other side are trying to communicate to you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Great. Bradley J writes, hello, Rudy and Samantha. How does the other side answer as a collective and give the same message? It seems with countless souls on the other side, there would be different and conflicting answers over time. Is there some kind of consensus or agreement taking place before you are given a picture or knowing?
Okay, so there's a few people I talk to on the other side. Many times it is my tribe, like my family who passed over. It could be your family or anybody who's in the chat room. It could be their people. When people cross over, then they are, and they've had their end of life review. Those are the only ones I talk to. I don't talk to anyone stuck in between because they haven't had their end of life review yet, right? Huge difference in my experience as a medium talking to somebody who is trapped in between versus, or choosing not to cross over versus someone who's already had their end of life review. They're now a light being again, but showing me their attributes of their humanity when they were here so I can identify them to their family and friends. And I did notice that a lot of times they'll almost like elect one person to step forward. Because one lady, I described her grandfather. I talked about that story where he was wearing a suit and everything, but I told her I could see a bunch of people behind him, but they were sort of back behind him, so I couldn't see them, but I could see that they were there. It's almost like when you're at a theater or a play, and then you can see there's the bright light that's on the actor that's on stage, but you can kind of see if people are off to the side or whatever. Even though they're in darkness, you can still see that there's forms there, there's people. And that's kind of how it is, where like the person that's talking to me has a spotlight on them when they're actually showing me what they look like. That doesn't happen all the time. But it seems that they do collectively put in this effort to allow me to see that one person and communicate with them. But I'm not sure if the information is just from that individual or if it's from the collective family that's trying to communicate.
Okay. And then it still has to come through the interpretation, right? So even though you get a picture, I think that's always the tough part is, hey, this medium said this. People always want to compare what one says to another, but it still has to come through this human filter, right?
Yes, it does. And that's one of the things that I like about the level of practice I get from doing this type of work, because a lot of people commented on how much material I had, the different formats. I mean, when you think about it, we've got our Meetup here with you and I. We've got Muant. I do the live streams with different with the peeps here on Patreon. And we also have Ask a Medium. We have Samnet, which is really the news one that people want to get the medium's point of view on what's really going on in the world. And I highly recommend it for anybody who gets to the point that they're like, yeah, okay, I'm definitely a medium. I have to learn how to do this better. It's all about the practice. It's just like exercising a muscle. But yeah, the translation, I always tell people that if something doesn't come true, that they're like, oh, well, maybe I should have done this. That I'm like, no, I was wrong. If I tell you something that is going to happen and it doesn't happen within the period of time that I'm expecting it, then I was wrong. My translation was wrong, totally wrong. Blame it on me. And then sometimes some people have told me something hasn't happened yet, but then they contact me later on and they're like, oh, you know what? You were a year off. I'm like, yeah, like that's happened before.
All right. Lexi writes, as our inner being passes through many lifetimes, does our basic intelligence, our personality, the way we think and interpret the world stay with us? How do we get smarter and more evolved from past experiences if we can't remember anything? Or is each life experience its own exclusive experience that does not build on information from past lives?
Of memory that your soul does carry with it, like the cellular memory, I guess you can explain it as. This would be, we've used the example before of people who could do something magnificently, like play the piano, and they had never taken a lesson. These are the sort of things that I'm talking about that do transcend the time and the human body, and they go with the light being that you are. They become part of you, and then they go into your next human experience with you, with these tools that you have. Just like with me being a medium, this is not something that was developed over time. I've been a medium since the beginning. Like, this is something that, you know, in my last life, I was a medium. In my life before, I was a medium. Like, that's where they put me. I have to be where there's medium DNA, I guess you can say. So that's why most people who have abilities, they have either they have some heritage.
Okay.
You know, there's some people in their family that were considered mediums, or that people would say, oh yeah, you know, Aunt so and so, she was considered kind of strange, but if you ever wanted to know anything, you would go to her, right? You know, that kind of thing. She seemed to have a lot of really good luck too, you know.
Yeah.
She moved out of that house just before it burned down. It was so weird. And then, you know, yeah. But yeah, I try my best to explain how it works. And then of course there is directly from source that you can get information as well.
Okay. Oh, good question, Lexi. I like the way you think about that. Marty writes, hi guys, how real is the law of attraction? They talk about thinking positive, affirmations and visualizations, and you'll attract anything you want in all walks of life. But then when you look at a Vedic astrology birth chart, it talks about the struggles you will face in life. I guess my question is, are there some things set out for us from birth, including certain struggles and some things we can change based on law of attraction practice? On a personal note, I'm grateful for my struggles as I feel it's made me into a better person. Thanks.
Oh, yeah. I mean, most people would not vote to get tossed out of their home when they're 15 years old. I'm just using that as an example that I do also agree that some of the sort of bad hand that we would get, that the struggles that we've had, and we overcome them, it does make us a better person. And remember as well that, I mean, if you knew the answers to the test ahead of time, well, that wouldn't really be fair. That's cheating if someone just gave you the answers. So that's why you come here with no knowledge of any of that stuff. I'm not like necessarily a believer that people sit there and make specific plans ahead of time. I talked before about like the nexus points.
Right.
These are things that you will choose to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe there's certain things that are going to happen, though, like you said, those nexus points. The rest of it can be luck and timing and just rolling the dice here on the earth realm, right?
Yes, and that's part of what it is that there is no definitive outcome. Okay. But there is only one outcome. Like, I don't believe that you live like multiple lives. I think that there at one time, I think there is only one life that you're living. It's right now where you're at here. And from this point to this point, you have to figure out the best route, the best decisions to make for the best life. And then when everything's all rolled up at the end, then you have your end of life review as a light being. And then you look at, where you excelled and did really well and where maybe you didn't do so well. So that when you come back again, these are the things that you can work on. And that's why it's called karma. Okay. You work on your karma. I believe that's what Nostradamus was trying to communicate to Dolores Cannon about karma. And a lot of people get that confused, like what karma is.
Yeah. Okay, great. William Penn writes, it has been mentioned previously that more people will turn to psychics in the coming years. Is there an event that would trigger this?
Yeah, the increase of the vibration, and all these people who maybe only had a little bit now have a lot.
All right. Nico writes, does the current Pope have a soul, or has he sold it? Is it possible to sell one's soul? Is it possible for a soul to be taken over somehow?
It is possible to have your soul taken over. That is why I do not channel.
Okay.
I believe that you cannot sell your soul. You just make choices that basically make your time down here a total waste of time, and you're just going to be severely disappointed when you pass away and you come out of your body and you realize that, well, just like that guy in the plane crash, remember? The lady who knew him, who used to be one of the Patrons, and she asked about she knew this doctor who I guess I didn't know he was Jewish. She said he was Jewish and he killed himself with his airplane, like he crashed his airplane. But I told her, I said, he's in between, like he's caught in between and he's wandering around and he's really shocked and he's like hollering, like, what, how am I still alive? How am I still alive? And it's like a lot of people, they don't realize, like, you know what? You're not dead. When you leave your body, you're not dead. You're more alive and more real than you were even as a human in the realm, in this, 3D realm. And when you cross over and you have your end of life review, I mean, really, that's what it is all about, and if you've just really wasted your time here on the earth realm, I mean, what a shame, because that just puts you that much further back from, getting to your goal and reaching the next level as a light being.
Yeah, Nika's question makes the song "The Devil Went Down to Georgia" just popped into my head. But I think sometimes people confuse selling your soul to the devil with really kind of tampering with familiar spirits, where you can get maybe things happen if you dabble in the familiar spirits and trade with them, but you're not actually selling your soul. But you can get in big trouble with that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. And you can also get a lot of health problems. Like I told you about that medium that I went with my friend. She wanted to take me with her to take notes for her reading. And I was 17 years old at the time. That was the one where the medium said to me, she says, "You're a medium. Why aren't you using these gifts that you have?" Okay. And I just said to her, "No, thank you. It's not for me." And what I was thinking in my mind was that I didn't like how the beings that were around her, I didn't like how they looked. I was like, they look kind of strange to me. They don't look like the ones that these things are not, they're not right. And she was also had a lot of respiratory problems, asthma, and I think she said her thyroid was, anyways, I don't think she lived too many years past, and she was only maybe in her late 50s when I met her, late 50s, early 60s. And she was in really bad health and passed away not too long after that. And, I didn't go into it. My friend was like, "What's that all about? What does she mean you're a medium?" I'm like, "I don't know."
Nika writes, considering the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," and regarding karma, if someone who is guilty of a heinous crime is given the death penalty, who is responsible for the karma for their death? Is it the person put to death, or the one that sentences them, or the one that pulls the switch?
None of them. It's justice.
Okay.
Right. That's, the whole thing about the difference between, if a mob comes in and were to hang somebody, well, then they're criminals. They're guilty of murder. But if you have a trial and a decision is made, this is the penalty, death. So there's nobody who's going, just like soldiers who've killed people in war. That's not counted against them. They're soldiers. They're doing their job as they're described to do it. And it's, but think about that, or, having, working in the penal system and putting people to death versus somebody, stalking and murdering an innocent person because they're pissed at them.
Yeah, carrying out the will of society, the rules we've agreed to live amongst ourselves. Yeah, I could see that not being an issue. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that. Lexi writes, mental disorders have a common thread that their brain is giving them wrong thoughts, signals, misinformation that seem to be believable and real to them. They are all having the same basic experience, but their circuits are crossed. When people have a near-death experience, they report having the same basic experience. Are both controlled by the actual wiring in the brain?
No, the wiring in the brain, it's having a mental illness. Like, for example, if somebody has bipolar, right, and they have the same experience, and it's because, well, that is mental illness, and these are the symptoms of it. This is how we treat it, etc. Just like, oh, you have lymphoma, right? These are the symptoms. This is how we treat it. Like that's a body thing, and that's completely separate from, comparing it to anything else.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Raymond writes, if the universe was created by an intelligent being and nature does not waste anything, what is the purpose of the other 8 planets, including Pluto? If they just appear to be lifeless rocks, do they serve to keep Earth in balance? Do they harbor life forms we don't know about? Or is there a role in the future for them that we don't know about? Thanks, Sam and Rudy.
Well, it's just like, pebbles on the beach. I mean, when you have a beach, there's pebbles. And when you have a solar system created, there's planets. This is just the way that it is. This is when it's created. It's not about things being wasted or being useful. It's just, what is. There's no specific job for that pebble on the beach other than to remain being a pebble on the beach. And it's not everything. I know people say, oh, nature doesn't waste anything. And it's like, well, you can't apply that to the things that just are. It's like, this is the architect of it. So,
and if the pebble wasn't there, it would be a different beach, so that it's part of the whole, but it's not, I guess, how do you want to say that? It doesn't serve a purpose, but it's being there is important, maybe is a way to say it.
It just is. It's just, it just is. It's just the way that it is. And
Hummingbird says, hi, Sam and Rudy. When people have organ transplants, many people describe of new habits and behaviors that they didn't experience before. I believe that our cells contain certain memories which cause people to feel this way. Do you believe it's true? Thanks again for all the interesting discussions and downloads. I think it was a couple months ago we talked about, gave a couple examples of this, right? So cellular memory. I think you've already talked about that too.
100%. People tell those stories, and I'm like, I think that if you do end up using the part of someone else's body that had their soul in it, there is still some personality traits, etc., that are sort of deeply embedded in the cells. So I completely understand why that happens, because we are more than just we are more than what we appear to be.
Okay. Yeah, I think we had a good example of somebody having cravings for red meat after they got a heart transplant. So there's all kinds of weird stuff in this world. That's for sure. What happened? Down Under writes, what happened to Frederick Valentich? He was an Australian pilot who disappeared while on a training flight in a light aircraft registered VH-DSJ over Bass Strait on the evening of Saturday, 21 October 1978. What did he see and what happened to him and his plane? So do you get anything on this Frederick guy?
So before they said the Bass Strait, I saw him going down in water. And he crashed in water. So are they saying the strait of, it was some sort of body of water he was flying over?
Yep. So he was an Australian pilot training. And if I look up, I'm not sure where Bass Strait is. Or is it Bass Strait, Australia? So this is the area, I think between Tasmania? But it's southern Australia, basically. It looks like.
And what is there, like a large body of water there that he would be flying over?
Yeah. So let's see here. This is the southeastern tip of Australia. There's kind of a body of water. It's a strait between the very bottom, that very tip at the bottom right of Australia. So it's a large body of water. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was that as soon as you said Bass Strait, I was like, that matches with him telling me. He actually showed up as soon as you said his name.
Okay.
Yeah, because I heard him say that I crashed in the water.
Okay.
And then when you said Bass Strait, I was like, oh, he was flying over water. Well, let's see if it's big enough that he could crash over it and they could potentially not find him. So that's in the ocean.
Right.
He crashed there. That's in the ocean. Oh, yeah. And if whether or not they find you, it's hit and miss. Down Under said yes, between Australian mainland and Tasmania.
Okay.
And Steve Amy says, did you guys ask about Amelia Earhart? Steve, I do agree with the idea that she crashed and did survive for a short time on an island. She did manage to find a piece of land that she was able to crash land on. But unfortunately she succumbed to her injuries and, starvation, etc. So.
Okay. Yeah, there were some reports of her being seen at like a Japanese POW camp at one point, I think. I'd have to look at that, but
no, she did die, but she survived for a little bit, and I don't know if they found her or not. I can't remember, because this is stuff that I've known for a long time, and then if something comes out, I can't remember if that's just a figment of my imagination or did they find a plane that could have been hers. And yeah.
Okay, well, that's cool down under. That was, you got a good bit of blab there, and Sam was able to get that information. So very cool. Yeah, and that can always be mechanical. You run out of fuel. That sort of a flight, probably mechanical would be my guess. But
yeah, he didn't say. He just said I crashed in the water, and then he showed me. He showed me like him going into the water, and I was like, well, if hopefully it was a large enough body of water, then I know the information that he gave me was right.
Okay. All right. Final question of the night, Sam. Can you describe a life review? Is there reprimand or just contemplation and do-over knowing? It's from Monica.
Oh, an end-of-life review. It's not so much repercussions as it is the understanding of why you're going on to this next path versus maybe the one that you wanted. See, some people will get the prize and get to go on to the other path that they're striving to go on, but you don't get to go on that path until you have to, there's 3 things that you're dealing with still, 3 karmic things you're still dealing with before you can go on that path, right? And that's the one you want to go on. Okay, I'm gonna go to Earth and I'm gonna spend my time there and see if I can work out the karma that I'm, the things that are going to make me better as a light being, because like I said, over there, we can't learn anything new because everything's perfect. We can create stuff with our mind. I mean, put somebody in a human body, then you find out what they're really made of.
Well, and I think you've said before also, as we talk about the end of life reviews, that, if you were harmful or you were very mean to someone, you're going to feel that when you go to your end of life, right? So you're going to experience what you made other people experience, good and bad, and that's all part of it as well, right?
Yeah, that's all part of it. Just because, again, you have a very clear understanding of like the fear and terror that you put into, maybe your wife and your kids that you abused constantly, and then you were all wondering why after she died, the kids never came around as adults and blah, you know what I mean? Blah, 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 in denial right until the end, died. And then when you have the end of life review, when you actually are on the receiving end of those punches, and then you're inside your little girl's eyes looking at dad like your mother and the feeling she went through. And so it's not they're not even wagging the finger at you. It's almost like you come out of it like just with such a deep understanding of why it is that you have to go back again. Relearn. There's no argument, right? There's no argument. We're all equal over there. And it's just, some of us really screw up when we come down here. And I say us and we, because, we are a collective all together. We're all in this together, and we all want everybody. I mean, I guess I can't speak for everybody, but I'm sure everybody in this crew all wants everybody to do better. And that's what we're all about, sharing and supporting one another with our ideas. And of course people want some insight, from the psychic medium. And I'm happy to give that to you because I'm learning as well. And every time I learn stuff, I tell you guys like right away, because I know that information is going to help someone else who's also struggling with their gifts and abilities and maybe feeling that they're not making that much headway, and, or feeling like they're so far like below their abilities compared to Samantha Jane, right? And my point to people is, hey, listen, you've seen me go down in a ball of flames before. Like, you just can't be afraid. You just have to do it, and you can't be afraid to fail, because you will, and you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with misinterpreting translation, not translating something correctly, and that will happen. I think that no matter how good I am as a medium now or in the future, I don't feel like I will ever be, completely 100%. And I feel that that would almost make somebody like me dangerous if you were, because it wouldn't take you too long to get full of yourself, first of all. Oh, wait, I can't get my head through the door. Right? You're like, no, Samantha, not you. That wouldn't happen to you. I was like, yeah, I make too much fun of myself. I probably would never be like that. But, that would make it dangerous for me if I was 100%.
Yeah. Well, I posted the Psychic Room a video to a Christopher Walken Saturday Night Live skit where I think it's Ed Glosser, Trivial Psychic Medium, where he gets this random stuff that's completely useless, right? But like, sometimes I feel like that. Like I get information and it's like, well, what am I going to do with it? But anyway, we're all here to grow, right? So,
absolutely.
All right.
I have such a great time with all of you guys. Thanks so much again for all of your great questions. And Rudy, keep up the great job finding all of those wonderful topics that it's emanating with everybody, because everybody's showing up every 2 weeks for Rudy's Psychic Meetup.
Well, we'll keep at it. So see everyone in 2 weeks. So look forward to it.
Have a good night, and we'll see you in 2 weeks, Rudy.
Good night, everyone.
Bye for now.